Hi there! Let me ask you this. Can making arbitrarily complicated systems improve a video game? Today, I want to talk about what I call cryptic game systems. What's that? It's a term I just made up, but I think it's a real thing anyway. So, imagine you're playing Pac-Man. It becomes immediately clear that the ghosts are chasing you, and what you have to do is just avoid them. Easy, right? It presents a player with a system which seems simple enough on the surface, but actually, it turns out that it follows a much more complex and interesting set of rules. The Pac-Man ghosts actually each have their own unique behavior and heuristics they follow, which combine to create interesting gameplay situations. Importantly, even though this system has very specific rules, the game never explicitly teaches these intricacies to the player, hence my use of the word cryptic. Today isn't about Pac-Man though. Today is about turnips. I'm going to be showing you a cryptic game system and tell you how it is explained to the player. Then I'll tell you how it actually works in detail, and finally, I'll try to show why I think having these types of cryptic game systems can contribute to a positive gameplay experience. In Animal Crossing New Horizons, there's a cryptic game system called the Stalk Market. Every Sunday, a boar will come to your island and sell you turnips. Every subsequent real-world day, the local shop will then offer to buy these turnips. The buying price fluctuates up and down, and as a player, you want to make a profit by selling them for more than you bought them for. They rot after a week, so you want to find the highest price to sell at before that. This much is basically what's tutorialized by the game. But how are the prices actually calculated? Everyone wondered at the same time. Obviously, it didn't take long for people to figure that out. Only a little more than a week after the game was released, Twitter user Ninji posted the actual reverse-engineered C++ code used in the game to calculate turnip prices. Link in the description. I'll be showing the code on screen, but instead of dragging you through it line by line, I'll present it in a more logical way, which is hopefully easier to understand. Let's take a look. The prices are much less random than I would have thought. The bumps and valleys of the week's turnip prices actually follow one of just 4 different patterns. There were similar patterns in the previous Animal Crossing game, and the community calls them the spike girls. They're small spike and large spike, decreasing, and random. Actually, no one calls them the spike girls. Your first week in the game always has the small spike pattern, and for every subsequent week, the pattern is randomly chosen, but the chances are determined by your previous week's pattern, as seen in this table, taken from the helpful document Breaking Down the Stock Market by Reddit user Edricus. You buy the turnips on Sunday for a price between 90 and 110 bells. This value is used as a base price to scale the subsequent prices for the rest of the week. For simplicity, we'll assume the base price is 100. There are then 12 remaining values to calculate, as you get a new price in the morning and afternoon. So we'll call each of these values half days. The first pattern we'll look at is small spike. The price drops, there's a small spike, and then the price drops again. The max price this week is calculated to be between 140 and 200. We start out by getting between 0 and 7 half days where the price decreases. It starts at 40 to 90 bells, then decreases by 3 to 5 percentage points every half day. Then we get 2 half days where the prices are random between 90 and 140. We get 1 day between 140 and the max price. And then we finally get the half day with that aforementioned max value. Finally, we get another half day between 140 and the max value. If any half days remain, we run a decreasing phase exactly like in the beginning. Here are all the different variations these random amount of half days can produce. On to the next pattern, which is large spike. This week decreases, has a huge spike, and then low random prices. It starts at between 85 and 90 and decreases by 3 to 5 percentage points every half day for between 1 and 7 half days. Then there's a half day where the price is 90 to 140, then it's 140 to 200, and then comes the big one. It's between 200 and 600. It then decreases again with between 140 and 200, and finally 90 to 140. For the remaining half days, the price is random between 40 and 90. That can generate these patterns. Next is the worst pattern, decreasing. This pattern intentionally looks like large spike in the beginning, with the same starting parameters and decreasing rates. The only difference is that the big spike never comes. Therefore, this pattern only generates one scenario. Finally, in the random pattern, we'll see a total of 5 decreasing half-days and 7 random half-days. First, we have between 0 and 6 half-days of random prices at 90 to 140, then between 2 and 3 half-days of decreasing, starting at 60 to 80 and decreasing by 4 to 10 percentage points per half-day. Then we have a random phase between 1 and 7 half-days. Then we have a decreasing phase like the first one, whose length makes sure we have exactly 5 decreasing half-days in total. Finally, if any half-days remain, we have some random half-days again. This one can produce a lot of different patterns. And that's it! As you can see, that was a lot more complicated and arbitrary than you might have expected. Let me show you how to use this knowledge. You record the prices every day during the week and then go through all the variations and check which of them could possibly fit the data. A lot of online tools can do this for you, and they usually show you a graph. But I actually prefer seeing it as a table. It shows more of the raw data, and the condensed version seen in the graph actually gives off a completely wrong picture. Here, I'm using a website called Turnip, which thankfully shows both a graph and a table. Take this case. The base price was 100, and the prices in the first 2 days were 59, 56, 52, and 47. Decreasing a large spike can't start that low, and random only starts below 80 if the first high random phase had a length of 0, which is pretty unlikely, and even then, it can't go on for more than 3 days like we saw here. So this data has to be small spike, specifically one of these 4 scenarios, which each have a 25% chance of being the one we're in. Now look at the graph. This graph is created by taking the minimum and maximum prices for any of the pattern variations for each day, giving us a huge spread which doesn't say anything about the actual outcomes. This graph does not indicate that there are only 4 possible scenarios that can play out. In fact, it makes it look like there are any number of possible ways the rest of the week could play out. Like this one, where the price stays below 100 bells every day, or this one, where the price is 200 for 6 half-days in a row. But looking at the data, we can clearly see that neither of those are possible. So, anyways, knowing the intricacies of the system and looking at the data like this can obviously help a player make a lot of money in the game. But keep in mind that it's not a surefire way to make a profit every week. Some weeks will have the decreasing pattern, which never goes above the buying price. But besides explaining how the system works, I wanted to talk about turnips because I find it fascinating that the developers went out of their way to create a cryptic game system for it. Why? Because they didn't have to. I decided to play around with creating my own weekly price generator in Python, but following a much simpler and less predictable rule set. Here's how it works. First, choose a starting price between 80 and 120. Second, every half day you either increase or decrease the price, 50-50 coin toss. The amount you increase or decrease by is random, between 5 and 50 bells. The price doesn't go below 5, but has no upper limit. And that's it. This algorithm actually produces some pretty good-looking graphs. Look at those peaks and valleys and global maximums and local maximi. Unlike the actual stock market, this system cannot be gamed even if you have full knowledge of how it works. Because at every highest price you see, there's a 50% chance that tomorrow is going to be higher. And even if it dips, the price could still go up just a little bit more. Every time you make this gamble, though, you risk losing out. I guess my point with that system and this whole video is just that the game designers do have tools at their disposal to prevent cryptic game systems from being taken advantage of, simply by making them less clever and more like what they appear to be at first glance. Reducing the overall complexity of the system and making it more apparent what's going on gives the developer more control over how the player interacts with that system. But doing that comes at a great cost. The simpler you make a cryptic game system, the more of that interesting complexity you remove from the game, which lowers a sort of skill ceiling pertaining to the system. If, for example, the ghosts in Pac-Man acted completely randomly, or all just chased straight after the player, that would undoubtedly eliminate a lot of skill and knowledge required to master the game, and would ultimately remove interesting strategies from the player's repertoire. In the same way, if the stock market used my system to generate prices, it would get stale pretty quickly, seeing as it's just a glorified coin flipper. With a system so simple, all you have to do is find a threshold at which you will always sell your turnips, which maximizes average profits. We can simulate 10,000 weeks to show that the average max price per week is 168 bells, so a good heuristic is probably to always sell as soon as the price reaches this value. That way, you'll make around 15% profit per week. We can show this by simulating 50,000 weeks of selling at different price thresholds. On the x-axis, you can see different thresholds, and on the y-axis, you can see the expected average profit per turnip. As you can see, it rises consistently, and then tops out around the 168 mark I mentioned before. Now that I've identified this extremely simple heuristic, which always works, there's never any reason to stray from this strategy. The stock market would become a passive income, a solved system that would never require much attention again. Fortunately, that's not how it actually is. By having a complex system that the community can research together, performing well requires both the effort to learn about the system and then track the prices every single day. And because I, as the player, is presented with a couple of distinct possible outcomes for the remaining week, I'm completely engaged trying to figure out which pattern I might be in, and eventually, when to sell my turnips.